In 1885, a respected London physician spent his afternoon manually stimulating women's genitals until they convulsed with pleasure. He called it medicine. They called it relief, and neither understood what was really happening. But before we uncover how Victorian doctors turned ancient nonsense into a multi-million-dollar industry while remaining completely blind to what they were doing, hit that subscribe button. Because the next story I'm revealing will shock you even more. You won't want to miss it. London, 1889. A respectable woman in her early 30s steps through the heavy oak door of a physician's office on Harley Street. Her name doesn't appear in medical records. Victorian propriety ensured that women like her remained anonymous in the clinical logs of the era. But thousands of women just like her walked through doors exactly like this one, carrying the same unspoken burden. She's well-dressed, middle class, married to a businessman who provides well, but speaks little. Her symptoms are common for the time. She can't sleep. She feels anxious without clear reason. Her hands tremble. There's a frustration she feels but cannot name, a restlessness that has no acceptable outlet in her carefully ordered life. The doctor listens and nods. He's seen this before, many times. He writes in his ledger, hysteria, the female disease. A diagnosis so broad it could mean almost anything, yet so specific it applied only to women. The treatment room is clean and clinical. White walls, a leather examination table, medical instruments arranged with precision. But there's something else in the air, an uncomfortable intimacy that doesn't quite fit the sterile surroundings. What happens next is documented in Victorian medical journals, described in the dry language of therapeutic procedure. Sudden muscle contractions, flushed skin, a flood of physical relief that leaves her feeling, for the first time in months, genuinely calm. She leaves the office confused, slightly ashamed, but undeniably better. She doesn't understand why, neither does her doctor, but she knows she'll be back next week, and the week after that. The question no one was asking in 1889, what was really happening in these medical rooms across Europe and America? The diagnosis that brought women to Victorian doctors' offices didn't begin in the 1800s. It started more than 2,000 years earlier, in ancient Greece, with a theory so absurd it should have died in the classical era. Around 400 BC, Hippocrates, the father of medicine, proposed that women's wombs could detach and wander freely throughout their bodies. The Greek word hystera meant uterus. When women displayed symptoms like anxiety, fainting, or irritability, Greek physicians blamed a restless womb drifting through the body, pressing against other organs, and causing chaos. Plato took this further. According to ancient medical theory, if a woman remained childless too long, her womb would grow agitated and begin to roam. The prescribed cure was straightforward: marriage, pregnancy, and sex. But only for procreation, only within the bounds of social acceptability. By the Renaissance, physicians had abandoned the wandering womb theory. Anatomy had advanced enough to prove the uterus stayed in place, but the diagnosis of hysteria survived. It evolved. It spread. By the Victorian era, hysteria had become a catch-all diagnosis for virtually any female discontent. Medical textbooks from the 1800s list dozens of symptoms: nervousness, insomnia, irritability, loss of appetite, muscle spasms, shortness of breath, but also being too interested in sex, not being interested enough, reading too many books, having strong opinions, being too quiet, not smiling, causing trouble. The pattern was clear. If a woman wasn't perfectly compliant, perfectly content with her limited role in society, she was diseased. The English physician Thomas Sydenham estimated hysteria was the most common disease after fever. By the late Victorian period, doctors estimated that 3 out of every 4 women suffered from it at some point in their lives. 75%. Think about that number. 3/4 of all women diagnosed with a disease. The truth Victorian medicine refused to acknowledge. These weren't symptoms of a wandering womb or defective female biology. They were symptoms of sexual frustration, intellectual starvation, and the crushing weight of a society that had no place for women's actual needs or desires. By the mid-1800s, pelvic massage had become standard medical practice across Europe and America. It appeared in medical textbooks. It was taught in medical schools. Respected physicians performed it daily in their practices. The procedure followed a consistent protocol. The patient would arrive at the doctor's office, usually by appointment. She would be shown to a treatment room and asked to lie on an examination table. She remained partially dressed, covered by a sheet for modesty. Victorian propriety demanded this careful balance between medical necessity and social decorum. The physician would apply scented oils. Lavender and rose were most common, described in medical journals as having therapeutic properties. Then he would begin the massage. Manual stimulation of the vulva and external genitalia, using circular motions. Medical literature from the era describes this paroxysm in clinical detail. Sudden violent contractions of the muscles, particularly in the pelvis and abdomen. Flushing of the face and chest. Increased heart rate. Copious vaginal lubrication. Followed by profound relaxation and a sense of relief from symptoms. The process often took over an hour per patient, sometimes longer. Dr. Beto. From the doctor's perspective, this was purely clinical work. Exhausting, repetitive, physically taxing. There was nothing pleasurable about it, nothing sexual. They were inducing a therapeutic medical crisis to relieve disease symptoms. It was as clinical to them as setting a broken bone or draining an abscess. But why didn't they recognize what they were doing? Victorian medical education provides the answer. Medical textbooks of the era barely mentioned the clitoris. Female sexuality was not studied. It was not discussed. It was not acknowledged to exist. Doctor, this wasn't a fringe opinion. It was mainstream medical belief. Respectable women, according to Victorian medical theory, had no sexual desires whatsoever. Their reproductive organs existed solely for procreation. The idea that women experienced sexual pleasure was not just ignored, it was actively denied. So when doctors induced hysterical paroxysm in their female patients, they genuinely did not understand what they were causing. What Victorian physicians documented as a therapeutic crisis, we now recognize as simply an orgasm. The tragic irony is almost incomprehensible. For many Victorian women trapped in loveless marriages with husbands who believed wives should endure sex rather than enjoy it, these medical appointments provided the only sexual satisfaction they would ever experience in their entire lives. And it was disguised as treatment for a disease. By the 1880s, hysteria treatment had become a booming medical industry. Specialized clinics opened in every major city across Europe and America. Some physicians treated 50 or more women per day. Appointment books from the era show the same names appearing week after week, month after month, year after year. Women scheduling regular sessions like standing medical appointments. But doctors faced a problem. Their hands were cramping. The repetitive manual stimulation required to induce hysterical paroxysm was physically exhausting work. Some physicians developed chronic hand and wrist pain from performing the procedure dozens of times daily. In the 1880s, British physician Dr. Joseph Mortimer Granville invented a solution: an electric vibrator powered by a battery-operated motor. He called it a percussor and insisted publicly that it was designed only for treating male muscle disorders. But other doctors immediately recognized its potential for hysteria treatment. The device revolutionized the industry. Treatment time dropped from over an hour to under 10 minutes. By the 1890s, dozens of vibrator models flooded the medical equipment market. The 1906 Weiss Company catalog offered more than 20 different models. Then, something remarkable happened. Vibrators entered the home. By 1900, electric vibrators had become the fifth most common household electrical appliance in America. They appeared in Sears Roebuck catalogs, right next to sewing machines, toasters, and fans. The advertising language was revealing. One 1910 advertisement proclaimed, "Vibration is life." The economic scale was massive. By 1915, American physicians were earning an estimated $18 million annually from hysteria treatments. In today's money, that's over $450 million. Meanwhile, European spa towns built entire economies around hysteria treatment. Water cure facilities at Bath in England and Baden-Baden in Germany offered hydrotherapy, where high-pressure water jets were directed at women's genitals while they sat on specially designed chairs. The French called it la douche pelvienne, the pelvic shower. Women came in droves. Some spent weeks at these spas, receiving multiple treatments daily. Diary entries from the era hint at what women understood but couldn't say aloud. One anonymous woman wrote in 1892, "My weekly appointments with Dr. Harrison have quite restored my spirits. I find myself looking forward to Thursday afternoons with great anticipation." Another noted, "The treatment, though peculiar, provides relief unlike any tonic or medicine." Women recommended their physicians to friends. Networks of patients formed, all receiving the same treatment, all experiencing the same relief, all maintaining the same careful silence about what was really happening. The doctors remained completely oblivious. They saw only disease and cure. The women knew better. But in Victorian society, what they knew had no language, no acceptable way to be spoken. The end came from an unexpected direction. In the early 1900s, Sigmund Freud began publishing theories that, despite their many flaws, acknowledged one fundamental truth Victorian medicine had denied: women had sexual desires. His work sparked debates across the medical establishment. Then, in the 1920s, early pornographic films began circulating in underground markets. Some showed women using vibrators for explicitly sexual purposes. Suddenly, the connection became impossible to ignore. The medical device that had been advertised in respectable magazines and sold in family catalogs became associated with sexuality. The shame was immediate and absolute. Vibrators vanished from the Sears catalog by 1912. Doctors quietly abandoned pelvic massage. The devices that had filled medical cabinets were discreetly disposed of. No one spoke about what had been common practice just years before. In 1952, hysteria was officially removed from the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. After more than 2,000 years, the diagnosis finally died, but its legacy persisted. Women reporting legitimate medical concerns continued to be dismissed as hysterical or emotional. The term became shorthand for discounting women's experiences, and it remains so in many contexts today. It wasn't until the 1960s that researchers William Masters and Virginia Johnson conducted the first comprehensive scientific study of female sexuality. Their work confirmed what should have been obvious all along. What Victorian doctors had called hysterical paroxysm was simply orgasm. The final irony is staggering. Victorian physicians had spent decades accidentally providing exactly what women needed while treating them for a disease supposedly caused by the lack of that very thing. This history reveals how completely cultural assumptions can warp medical practice. The doctors performing these treatments weren't charlatans or fringe practitioners. They were respected physicians trained at elite medical institutions, following accepted protocols published in peer-reviewed journals. But they were so blinded by their society's absolute denial of female sexuality that they couldn't recognize the obvious truth literally at their fingertips. The women understood. They knew hysterical paroxysm brought relief. They scheduled appointments. They returned week after week. They recommended their doctors to friends. But in a world that denied women's sexuality could exist, even their own knowledge had to remain unspoken. This history isn't just a curious footnote. Its echoes still reverberate today. Women's pain remains systematically undertreated in modern medicine. Their symptoms are dismissed more frequently than men's, and the language persists. When women express strong emotions, they're still called dramatic, emotional, hysterical. The deeper truth: for centuries, women's sexuality was so threatening, it had to be medicalized. Pleasure could only be acceptable if prescribed by male medical authority. Between 1850 and 1920, millions of women received these treatments. Tens of millions of sessions performed by doctors who had no idea what they were doing. Which raises an uncomfortable question. What are we doing right now that future generations will find equally incomprehensible? The women in those treatment rooms deserved better than a society that could only see their needs through the lens of disease. If this story opened your eyes to how badly history has failed women, then subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell, because I'm diving deep into more hidden histories that will change how you see the world. Stories that matter. Stories that connect to today. Next up, why Victorian women literally poisoned themselves with arsenic for beauty. Trust me, you need to see this. Like this video if you learned something. Drop a comment and tell me. What shocked you most about this story? Let's make sure these voices from history aren't silenced again.